Have you heard of haiku? And what has that to do with antinatalism? Will antinatalism solve everything, everywhere, and all at once? And where is David Benatar? Are there any non-selfish reasons to have children? What about the right to have children and well-being of the child? Which one should overweigh which one and on what basis? These are the questions we'll be looking at today's Antinatalism This Week update. But before that, one quick update. Let's have a look at the speakers whose names have been declared for the Anti-Natalist conference. Two more names were declared, which are Seb Alex and Mati Hairi. So let's start with Mati Hairi. There was a new paper published with the title Anti-Natalism Solving Everything, Everywhere, All at Once by Juna Rasanen. I'm sorry if I'm saying that name wrong, and Mati Hairi. And in the paper, the authors touch a few different points, but the main question they are asking is, will antinatalism solve everything? Will it solve everywhere? And will it solve all of that all at once? And if you think about it, if there is nobody to suffer, all of your problems like the crime, disease, suffering, climate change, everything is going to be solved. And that way, antinatalism will solve everything. Will it also solve everywhere? If you take the perspective of global antinatalism, which is the idea that procreation at all times in all places causes harm, then it will solve it everywhere also. Will it solve it all at once? And here the authors say that no, it will not solve everything everywhere, but not all at once, because the last generation is going to feel the most pain. The generation before that is going to feel a little less, but still a lot of pain, and so on. This was also the point made in chapter 6 by David Benatar in his Better Never to Have Been. A couple of more points to note in that paper. The authors compare life to a pyramid scheme. Not the first time I have heard this being done, but they put it very nicely. Life thus bears a resemblance to a pyramid scheme, where new participants work for the well-being of the previous victims of the scheme, creating a vicious circle where new people must be recruited to benefit those already within the system. They also make a crucial difference between ending humanity through killing and ending humanity through non-procreation. They say non-existent cannot be harmed by not being brought into existence. Therefore, not having children harms no one. Thus, there is a crucial moral difference between ending humanity by means of killing and by means of procreation. Do I agree with what has been said in the paper? I think I agree with almost everything in the paper. The only one thing, and it's an important thing, is that we should not be looking only for humanity, because if humanity goes extinct, let's say through non-procreation, it solves all the problems for humans. But the problems remain in terms of other animals suffering. So, as long as our antinatalism includes other animals, all sentient life, only then can we say that antinatalism will solve everything and everywhere, although not all at once. And I don't think the authors necessarily think that it's only humanity to whom antinatalism applies, because they use sentient life interchangeably throughout the paper. But I just thought I should point that out. There is an event coming up on 1st of November in the city Toronto, I don't know how to say that name, but that city in Canada, by David Benatar. It is going to be an in-person event, and name is A Preponderance of Injustice. The subject is injustice. If there is more injustice than justice in the world right now. Secondly, is there more injustice, or if there is more justice compared to the past in the world right now? And then he also is going to talk about the belief that people have that the road to justice is a long road, but ultimately we do get justice. Is that true? How true is it? Is that false? And so on is the evaluation he's going to present. That is a topic. I have emailed them asking if there would at least be an audio recording of the event, because I know that David Benatar would not allow a video recording. I have not heard back yet, so let us see what happens. There is a new event coming up in 2024. It is on existential threats and other disasters and how should we address them. It's organized by the Center for Study of Bioethics, the Hastings Center, and the Oxford Center for Practical Ethics. Among the many speakers of the events are Peter Singer and Julian Sabulescu. Another point to note about the event is that they are calling for papers on abstract proposals on the topic, and if you want to present anti-natalist perspective, this is a good chance to do. The deadline for your submissions is 10th of November, and you might as well, from anti-natalist perspective, turn over the definition of existential threats on its head. There was an article on unfinishedsuccess.com. No kids, no problem? Not so fast. Here are 12 downsides of child-free life. And the 12 reasons they have mentioned are limited family legacy, loneliness in old age, no immediate heirs, missed parenthood experiences, limited social connections, financial freedom delayed, no built in caregivers, less emotional support, limited opportunities for growth, no one to pass on wisdom to, stigma and social pressure, no one to share responsibilities. Of the 12 reasons they have given, is there any reason which is for the child which is going to be born? Is there any child centric reason to bring about that child? There is none. And yet, people who don't have children, or especially women who don't have children, are accused to be selfish. Whereas the reasons to have children are all about the parents themselves. So the act of having children is actually a selfish act. There was an article with the title From Alarm About Overpopulation to Advancing Depopulation. This is really an alarmist article about population collapse. But the point to note is that the article talks about population decreases in many different countries, including countries like Japan, Spain, Italy, Poland, and even in the countries where population is not decreasing right now, but is expected to decrease. So China is decreasing and expected to decrease even further. Some African countries also would be expected to decrease their population by end of this century. It selects these specific countries. The point to note is that it does not talk anything about the country which has the largest population in the world today, which is India. And I'm not saying that because I am in India or I am Indian, but because if you're talking about population, demography, or depopulation, you cannot ignore the country which has largest population in the world. There was a paper with the title Whether and How We Will Continue to Reproduce Ourselves, published by Grace Cow. And the paper is behind the paywall, so I could not read the entire paper. But from the abstract, it looks like Grace is talking about the tensions between religious ethics, which generally promote for having more children, and on the other hand, challenges posed by antinatalism and climate change. There is an article by Ryan Sosna with the title Why Do Antinatalists Oppose Birth? This is a very good article explaining Benatar's asymmetry. What Ryan does is he takes an example of a hypothetical mother called Sarah. She's going to have a child, and there's a probability that the child is going to have a very miserable life because of some disease. Most of us would agree that if that is the case, if the child is going to suffer because of some extreme disease, then Sarah should not have that child. What this tells us is that we have a duty to not bring suffering people into existence. But we don't have an equal necessary duty to bring happy people into existence. And what Ryan says is that this asymmetry between the duties, the duty to not bring suffering people into existence, but no duty to bring happy people into existence, this asymmetry between the duties tells us two things. One is absence of pain is good even if nobody is experiencing that good. And absence of pleasure is not bad unless somebody is deprived of those pleasures, which are the assumptions of Benatar's asymmetry. And therefore, Ryan says that Benatar's asymmetry is true. And then he concludes that from that we can derive that if Benatar's asymmetry is true, that means bringing somebody into existence is a net harm. Then Ryan says that because bringing somebody into existence is a net harm, it outweighs the benefits of right to procreate of the parents. So, when deciding whether Sarah should have a child or not, we need to evaluate whether she should execute her right, conduct a right to procreate, or whether she should look at the welfare of the child. And because the child is harmed by net harm of asymmetry, and that net harm is outweighing the right to procreate, therefore she should not have the child. And that is the antinatalist position Ryan explains. And I think there's a slight flaw in that. The flaw is that we automatically assume that the net harm is outweighing the right to procreate. The right to procreate, which is derived from the benefits of experiencing motherhood, parenthood, bringing up child, and so on. We need to look at how that happens. Benatar goes in much detail about how that happens. He has written a chapter on why that net harm is not a trivial harm but a very serious harm, which outweighs anybody's right to procreate. Ryan does not do that. I have a slight different thinking on this. What I have been thinking about is not something I have read in any of the philosophy books or said by any philosophers. So I am very open to correction. Please let me know in the comments. What I've been thinking is that once you accept the truth of asymmetry, which tells you that there is a net harm, it doesn't tell you whether it's a serious harm or a trivial harm, a small harm or big harm. It just tells you there's a net harm. Net harm here means the benefits of life minus the harms of life. Now, if you are an antinatalist, you would agree that net harm is always positive, you're always harmed. But people argue that no, it's a subjective thing, net harm might be negative, people are benefited, and so on. But asymmetry just proves that there is net harm. When comparing right to procreate versus the welfare of the child or well being of the child, we should not be comparing the net harm of that child. Once we have accepted the asymmetry, that's enough to prove there is net harm. But while doing the comparison of right to procreate and well being of the child, we should consider absolute harm, meaning not benefit minus harms, just the harms of life, because we've already accepted the asymmetry for net harm. Now we need to compare absolute harms to the benefits of right to procreate. And if you do that, then it is very easy to see that absolute harms very easily outweigh any benefits of right to procreate, and therefore we should not, they should not, or prospective parents should not procreate. A new episode on exploring antinatalism was out this week. It was an interview with Dan Dana, and it was interesting because the profile of Dan Dana is quite interesting. He's a grandfather of two. In the interview, he talks about connection between atheism, antinatalism, and veganism. Although he is only two of them, which two of those three, you need to watch the interview. What's more interesting is that he has written a book in haiku. Haiku is a Japanese poetry style. And what he's done is he has composed these haikus in English on ethical antinatalism, and he has published them as a book. In the interview, he reads some of them, which are quite interesting. Overall, it's an exciting interview. Please go and watch. So those were the stories that caught my eye about antinatalism this week. Please let me know if I've missed any. Thank you.